Hello, welcome back to Evolving Together Now. And if this is your first time, well, welcome. I'm glad that you're here. Remember, if you like what you hear, subscribe and tell your friends. Today, part 2 of Sex in the Universe. The audacity and diversity of sex. The topic of sex, of course, brings to mind the birds and the bees. What is that story anyway? I don't have children, so I was never prevailed upon for it. So before Googling, I thought I'll ask several friends. So one friend said, "Oh, my parents never talked about sex, birds, bees, nothing." And then she commented on how she appreciated part 1 of Sex in the Universe and thought that, geez, if she'd learned about it that way when she was young, it wouldn't have been so hard to talk about. Another friend said she thinks birds and the bees is a euphemism for human sex, not really about how bees do it and birds do it. And commented that her parents didn't talk about sex and that it's still a difficult subject. She also commented on part 1 of Sex in the Universe of it just made it seem natural to talk about sex. So I really appreciate all of that, my goodness. And another third friend said she feels like we haven't evolved to talk about sex because we don't live with animals on the farm like our ancestors did. So breeding animals and helping them birth their young as needed. And she also commented she hopes anatomy and biology are taught in school and that kids are learning about how integral bees are to our life on Earth. Indeed. I've been mentioned to one friend about maybe people are shy in talking about sex because as humans we enjoy it for reasons beyond reproduction, and maybe that feels embarrassing. And she added maybe folks feel like they'll be thought of as having a fetish. So there's all kinds of ins and outs, experiences and perceptions around this that we each hold. Oh, what if we talked about it more openly? What difference would it make? Birds and the Bees story has been and is a way for some parents to have that first sex talk with their child. The pollinating by the bees referring to courtship and insemination, the hatching of the bird eggs referring to pregnancy and childbirth. The fact that it draws on nature is fabulous, and I'm sure has been educational over the years. But as a euphemism, it can also be a way to talk about it without talking about it, and to avoid and deflect. No doubt we want our kids to grasp more than what we understood about sex when we were young. But assuming our kids, as good as they may be, understand the depth and breadth of sex and sexuality, not just physically, but emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and even financially, to assume that is dangerous. Our human experiences and discoveries are greatly influenced by sex over millennia. What if we really honored how natural sex is in nature? What might we also learn about ourselves? How might that change us? An abbreviated evolutionary story of the birds and the bees. To honor the audacity and diversity of the evolution of sex from which we each emerge. After 4 billion years of adventure and achievement, all 5 of the realms of life were represented in the Earth community: bacteria, eukaryotes, fungi, plants, and animals. As described in the universe story, life had passed a critical threshold and had drawn out from pure potentiality a living, acting being. A new cause had appeared in the world, a power that could not exist but for the intimate communion of those particular cells, a power that immediately set to the task of ordering the community in new and surprising ways. Intimate communion of those particular cells ordering the community in new and surprising ways. 4 billion years ago, prokaryotic cells. Now, bacteria reproduces asexually. They do it alone because they replicate themselves by dividing in half. It's called binary fission. So they are the first forms of life and also the hardiest creatures on the earth. One spoonful of soil is said to have 50 million bacteria in it. They are the core form of life in Earth's community. 2 billion years ago, things changed with the evolution of eukaryotes. The eukaryote cells invented meiotic sex, allowing for controlled genetic exchange between organisms. With this, the universe's diversity expanded 100-fold. These first multicellular organisms were the predecessors of all complex life on Earth, from plants to insects and reptiles to mammals. Now 2 genetically different beings could unite and fashion a radical new being. As cosmologist Brian Swimme says, the first multicellular animals were as much a surprise as the emergence of the galaxies. The third of the 5 realms we're looking at is fungi. And fungi usually reproduce both ways, asexually, do it alone, and sexually, though some fungi it's one way or the other. And sexual reproduction in fungi, as with other organisms, involves the 2 nuclei being brought together when 2 sex cells unite. And the sex organs in fungi are actually called sex pheromones, chemicals produced by one partner to elicit a sexual response in the other. 4th realm is animals. Do you know that some seahorses carry their young in an abdominal pouch into which the female has injected her eggs? He fertilizes them there. As one author noted, he's definitely certain of his paternity. For the clownfish, the female is the largest and the male the second largest. If the female dies, the male changes sex and takes her place. Then the largest non-breeder becomes the breeding male. And subordinates in the group, they queue for breeding positions. Male frogs ride on the back of female frogs in order to spread their sperm on the eggs the moment she lays them. An interesting dynamic of male frogs is that if they're involved in parental care of the eggs, then they will spread their genes more widely, more assuredly. So in doing that, then the female, after laying the eggs, is free to leave. The sex of flowering plants. Angiosperms reproduce by making seeds that are enclosed in an ovary, rather than on cones or leaves like gymnosperms. And they rely on pollinators like birds, bees, and others, as well as the wind. So this new symbiotic relationship with insects was an evolutionary leap, transporting pollen, fertilizing the plants on which they feed. Peafowl are especially captivating to me, and that's the species name for what we commonly call a peacock. But a peacock's the male, peahen the female. During courtship, the peacock will spread his tail feathers, called a train, into a large fan shape and strut about, shaking his feathers to get the attention of the peahens. The peahen will choose a mate based on who has the largest and the most colorful feathers and is focused primarily on the lower portion of the train. To signal acceptance, the peahen will crouch down on the ground and the peacock will perform what's called a hoot dash, rushing toward her while making a loud call. During sex, the peacock will mount the peahen to align his tail with hers, which in turn aligns the sexual organs, known as cloacas. Both peacocks and peahens have cloacas. The peacock's sperm is then transferred to the peahen. After mating, the peacock will depart ways with the female. Males are not involved in any way in the raising of the young. Bonobos, a relative of the chimpanzee, the other great ape that we are most closely related to, engage in recreational sex as a daily activity. Males with males, female with female, adult with young. And this is seen in both the wild and captive bonobos. Males usually do not ejaculate during recreational sex. And the females engage in frontal genital-to-genital rubbing and seem to become excited as they do. And in a behavior dubbed penis fencing, males hang face to face from a branch while rubbing their erect penises together. Bonobo behavior resembles that proposed for early humans in 3 ways. Females are sexually receptive for long periods. Sexual life is rich, and for purposes more than reproduction. And bonobos walk bipedally with ease much of the time. Some takeaways from today. Algae do it, insects do it, plants do it, even fungi do it. There are asexual and sexual organisms. Asexual organisms still reproduce, they just do it alone. There are many ways to be sexual. Sex is natural. There's sex and sexuality. More on those two another day. The audacity and diversity of sex in the universe. For propagation of a species, yes, and more. Seems to me that not talking about it is not fostering the kind of healthy, healing relationships that we need on this earth. I say let's keep evolving to experience the kind of healing and the celebration of ourselves as human beings that we're capable of. Thank you for being here. I hope your own evolutionary journey has been enlivened. And remember, if you like what you heard or you're just darn curious, subscribe and tell your friends.